Shalom, this is Tony Robinson, bringing you thematic teachings from Restoration of Torah Ministries, and we're going to continue our series on seeing resurrection in the Torah. By the way, I just want to let you know that these teachings are organized and they're numbered, beginning with number 1, sequentially 1, 2, 3, etc. And when you come to the Restoration of Torah YouTube page, if you look at the top of the page where it says playlists, if you click on playlists, then you will be able to see all of the teachings on this playlist, which is entitled Resurrection in the Torah. So on the Resurrection in the Torah playlist, you will find all of the teachings numbered sequentially so that you can follow along easily in this teaching. So you remember in the first teaching that we did, we saw clear pictures of resurrection in day 3 of creation, and we also looked at some scriptures in Job. Again, Job is thought by many to be the oldest book in the Bible besides the Torah, or the first 5 books by Moses. So what we want to do now today is we want to look at some even greater examples of resurrection that use agriculture to show the picture of resurrection. Let's look at Numbers 17, verse 8. And it came to pass that on the morrow Moses went into the tabernacle of witness, and behold, the rod of Aaron for the house of Levi was budded, and brought forth buds, and bloomed blossoms, and yielded almonds. Now the first thing that I want you to realize is that this is a clear picture of resurrection. Now, how is this a picture of resurrection? Well, let me give you a little bit of context first. You remember that the children of Israel had been complaining to Moses, and so they kind of felt that Moses and Aaron, that there was a little nepotism going on there. And so Adonai gave them a commandment. He said, look, I want you to bring the leaders and have them bring their staffs and set their staffs before me, and the one that budded blossoms was the one that Adonai chose for the priesthood, and that was Aaron. So what we see here is that you have a rod or a stick. Now this stick is a dead branch. It is something that does not have life in it anymore. It's just a dead branch. Any stick is a dead branch. And so we see the picture of resurrection again because this dead stick brought forth buds. Not only did it bring forth buds, it bloomed the blossoms, and it actually yielded fruit. Okay, and so again we see clear picture of resurrection where we see life springing forth from a dead branch. And again we see this picture of resurrection being taught to us using the tree, and that takes us right back to Genesis 1 again, where when we saw our first picture of resurrection, which had to do with the blossoming of fruit and vegetables, trees, etc. And so we want to see how closely this passage is thematically connected to Genesis chapter 1, where it talks about the fruit trees yielding fruit after his kind. Okay, so you'll remember in Genesis chapter 1, verse 11 through 13, we said that that was a clear reference to resurrection. And now this passage in number 17 is also a clear reference on resurrection. And it's clearer than even Genesis 1. It is extremely clear that when you see fruit coming forth from the dead branch of a tree, it's a clear picture of resurrection. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to show you how baptism is also taught in Genesis 1. Let's read, instead of only verses 11 through 13, let's read 9 through 13 with particular attention paid to verses 9 and 10. Then God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Now what I want you to do is I want you to pay attention to the word gathered. The Hebrew word for the word gathered in Genesis 1:9 is yikavu, and it originates from the Hebrew root word kavah. Okay, in other words, Every word in Hebrew, no matter whether it's a noun or adjective or verb or what have you, every word in Hebrew comes from a three-letter consonantal root action word, okay? Kavah. So yikavu, the word gathered, comes from the word kavah. It originates from the root word kavah, which means to gather. Now, kavah, it just so happens, is also the root word that forms the basis for the Hebrew word mikvah. You can hear the kav in there, kavah and mikvah. And we know that mikvah is the Hebrew word for baptism. And so if you look in this passage, when he says the waters gathered together and the dry land appeared, you can see a clear picture of baptism with the earth emerging from the waters as if it had been baptized. Okay? So what we want to see here is that what happens with creation will happen to man. This is a general principle in the scripture. What happens to the creation will happen to man. So just as the creation underwent a mikvah, or a rising out of the water, so also will man. And to see this, we just need to go to Romans 6:3-4. It says, "Or do you not know that as many of us as were mikvahd, kavah, into Yeshua the Messiah, were mikvahd into his death?" Now there's your death. "Therefore we were buried with him through baptism into death." Okay, there's that. Just as Messiah was raised from the dead, that's resurrection, by the glory of the Father, even so we should walk in newness of life. And so, in other words, clearly right here in Romans 6, Paul is making a clear thematic connection back to Genesis 1, where we see the first baptism. The first baptism is when the waters were gathered together and the land appeared. That was our first baptism. And it is a picture of the baptism that we undergo in the Messiah. But the key point is that this baptism in Messiah is a baptism, it is a picture of our death and then our resurrection in the Messiah. And what we see in Genesis 1 verses 9-13 is in verses 9-10 we see a baptism, a mikvah, a kavah, where the earth comes out of the water. And then the next few verses 11-13 give us a picture of resurrection. So the baptism coming up out of the waters from death to newness of life that Paul speaks of in Romans 6 is clearly taught using agricultural terms and the proper Hebrew root words in Genesis chapter 1. So we can clearly see that. So what have we learned? We learned that the teachings on resurrection are often found in passages describing the growth of vegetation despite barrenness and death. We've seen that before. We've seen that the concept of baptism is clearly taught in Genesis 1, 9-13, especially verses 9-10, where we clearly see that the earth coming out of the water is a perfect picture of the baptism that all believers go through in the Messiah, where we die to the old man and rise up out of the waters in newness of life. The concept of baptism, therefore, is clearly thematically connected to Paul's teachings in Romans 6. And so both Genesis 1 and Romans 6 teach the close association of baptism to new birth and resurrection. That is clearly seen, new birth and resurrection. I also have another teaching where in Genesis 1 I teach you that the entire story of creation in Genesis 1 is about the need for man to be born again. So again, we clearly see death and resurrection. And so we see just from the first chapter that the Torah has a lot to say about resurrection, and I want you to stay with me as we continue to learn more. I hope this has been a blessing to you. May Adonai bless you in the name of Yeshua. Amen.